views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Alleyne. Coming up, NYC is battling the worst wave of COVID the city has seen in months. Why is the Bronx continuing to see high numbers despite an increase in testing? Then a host of new laws went into effect at the start of the year, and a legal analyst joins us for a discussion on life-changing legislation. Have some parts of the U.S. finally seen an increase on minimum wage? After that, New York State homeowners are now receiving a lifeline through the Homeowners Assistance Fund. With up to $50,000 in assistance, would you or someone you know qualify? And this week, the Whole Health Report, sponsored by Empire Bluecross Blueshield, is back. Join us for a discussion on their efforts to support the Bronx. Does this partnership also support healthcare workers? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin and Alleyne. I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Just weeks into the new year, the Omicron variant is still on the rise. Battling the worst wave of COVID we've seen in some time, city officials and local leaders encourage testing and vaccines. The Bronx currently has the highest positivity rate in New York City, and in some neighborhoods, that number is near 50%. Joining me to discuss the steps needed to address this problem is Cyrille and Njikeng, Manager Director of Oyate Group. Cyrille, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I understand the fight against this is an effort from the Oyate Group, an organization stemming from the Bronx Rising Initiative. When did your organization decide it was time to take some action?
In the beginning of the pandemic, Thomas Ramos, the founder and CEO of the Oyate Group, was going through. He was running for office in a congressional seat in the 15th district, and he didn't win the election. And while he was running for office, he decided in the midst of the pandemic to stop his campaign to start raising funds so that we can help, alleviate the issues that the Bronx was going through at the time, which was ICU bed capacity unit, bed capacity, and then at the time it was, it was still, the pandemic was new, so the issues in hospitals, to have people coming in and being on ventilators and everything was in. So we started raising funds. At that time it was just a couple of people, young men and women from the Bronx, just trying to help. And the more serious it got, then we decided to create the Oyate Group and make this official. So we've been there from the beginning. We've been there from the beginning of the pandemic.
Nice. So can you just explain some of the measures your organization has taken to fight against this?
Being part of the Bronx, we noticed that we're the highest hit in all the 5 boroughs, but we didn't have the resources that we needed to combat the pandemic. So we decided to create a grassroots campaign where we went in most of all the NYCHA facilities and actually knocked at doors and registered. At the time, it was 65 and older that were allowed to receive the vaccines. We registered all the elderly people in the NYCHA facilities, and then we brought in the vaccines in the community centers in the NYCHA facilities. Because remember, at that time, the city was asking people to travel to the Jacob Javits Center or to the Yankee Stadium. Most of our elderly people are on walker. They don't have the power, the strength to travel down the city. So we just brought the vaccine to them in their community center, and it was very successful. Again, it was a struggle because vaccine hesitancy was a great thing at the time. So that face-to-face discussion with our people in our community made a lot of difference, in the process. So we created a grassroots campaign. We brought in the vaccines. We vaccinated almost 35,000 people during that effort, and then we made sure that we register a lot of people to get their vaccines and educated them about the vaccines, because in our communities most people didn't want to take the vaccines. They were not ready for that.
Yes, I definitely was seeing that, so I agree 100% with what you're saying. Do you have any idea why the Bronx continues to see the highest positivity rates? Do you still think it's connected to vaccine hesitancy?
Yeah, that's one factor, vaccine hesitancy, but I think education is a great part of why we're having that issue, because most people are not educated. Some people get their information from the social media, people get their information from their TikTok feed, and how real those informations that they get are. So I think the main thing that we should have done from the beginning was educating the people about what they're going through, because again, nobody was prepared for a pandemic, right? It just hit us, and then now we had to go through the motions. And for African Americans and Africans, we've been through a lot, right? We've been experimented on a lot of times, so it plays with our mind, it plays with our psyche to just accept things that comes from the outside like that. But now, with informed people like us, who are part of the grassroots movement, and we are in the community, we're part of the community, and we're working to bring resources and help to the community. We're not going to just bring a vaccine to kill our people, right? And even if it's not us, we got our vaccines like in the beginning, because we're out there knocking at doors. So if somebody was supposed to die, we were gone long time ago. So I think the lack of education, to answer your question, and then just the vaccine, people are not ready. Some people are still not ready. And even though it's going down now, we have the Pfizer for 5 years and up. The parents that didn't take the vaccine, do you think they're going to take their children to get the vaccines? So it's a very tough, but it's our community. We're from the Bronx. We know how to deal with it. So we're still out there all the time. We're doing, we have a mobile unit, from time to time you see us posted on Kingsbridge, on 149 and 3rd, on different areas in the Bronx, where we want to meet the people where they are, because you cannot expect people to leave and come and get the information or get the vaccines. You have to go where they are, and that's how we're going to make these numbers go, down.
Now, I think it's really alarming that the numbers are so high citywide, despite seeing stories that more and more people are waiting hours to get tested. Do you still think that testing is as effective as it was maybe several months ago?
Mm, Again, I want to be careful on how to answer this, because many factors come in play when it comes to testing, right? Now we have I think I have one somewhere, but we have the kit, the kit that you can go on the CVS and buy and get it, do it yourself. You don't need to go far to do the PCR or do the rapid test. So the question becomes how accountable are we, towards this? How bad do we want to get back to normalcy, if there should be anything called normalcy again? So I think, always education, I'm always going to go back there, because I don't think we're doing a great job as a city or as a state to educate the people who need the education, because we have data. The Oyate group have data that shows the highest people who vaccinated, the list, and we have a whole if you go on our website on oyategroup.org, you're going to see the data is there. Those data show us who was willing to go out and get the vaccines and who was not. So we could use those data and say, okay, let's create some type of educational tool to let the people understand that now, after a year and a half, 2 years, this is not a joke anymore. People are still dying. I got the COVID in December. Throughout Christmas, I was down, and I got all the symptoms in one day. I got loss of taste, loss of smell, flu, body pain, everything in one day. I thought I was dying too, So, but I know that because I got my vaccine, everything just came and left. It wasn't like I was ready to go on a ventilator or something, So it was very mild. It hit me hard, but it was very mild because I was vaccinated. And now when I get my booster, I'm good, So it's education. You have to understand that this is not those times anymore where it was about experiment. Now people are dying. Italy was shut down for months. They lost a lot of people in many countries shut down. So we have to educate ourselves and get the right information, and then do what it takes to make it happen.
Now, I like that you mentioned a little bit about your experience. Now, if you take a look at your screen, you can see that at this point, many adults and children have received their vaccine. So, people are getting it. But for those who don't have it yet, can you explain why it's necessary in regards to public health? I know you talked a little bit about the hesitancy, but, why do we really want these people to go out and get that vaccine?
Again, this is a black male speaking about this, right? So it's very important, because if we don't get vaccinated, then people are out there who will be carrying the virus over and over, and we that are already safe. And again, I had a discussion with someone who was a anti-vaxxer. No, I don't want to call them anti-vaxxer, but who still didn't believe in that they should take the vaccine, or they're in the fence. Oh, what sense does it make if you were sick in December, you had the vaccine in February or March? What sense does it make? I'm like, no, getting the vaccine doesn't mean that you can't get the virus anymore. But the difference is that you can get the virus, but you're not going to get the type of like, if you didn't get the vaccine, you'll be on a ventilator, you'll be, passing out and everything, compared to if you got the vaccine. So for those people who are still on the fence, I just want them to do their research, to understand that if we aspire to go back to anything normal, we have to make sure that all of us together are vaccinated, so that it should not be, oh, you can't go in a bar or in a restaurant because you don't have your vaccine card, or you have to wear your mask. People are tired of that. We're seriously tired of that right now. It's time to go back to some type of normalcy. This week I'm taking my kids. All of them are getting their Pfizer shot, because the schools were shut down in the beginning of they were supposed to be closed on 24th, and they closed 3 days before, because the cases were very high in their schools. So I'm, as a parent living in the Bronx, I want to be home knowing that my children are not bringing back anything home because someone didn't get their vaccine. So, and that's the next step that we're taking as Oyate Group, is going into schools. We have a lot of schools they are ready, line up for us to bring in the vaccines effort in there.
Cyrille, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all the knowledge that you've been dropping. We're going to show quickly just where people can go look to learn more information, because like you mentioned, education is really, really important. But once again, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
A devastating and deadly 5-alarm fire on Sunday is the cause of 19 confirmed deaths that include 9 children here at 333 East 181st Street off Tebow Avenue, where the New York City Fire Department is citing a faulty space heater as the cause, shared Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson here on the scene.
We've learned from the FDNY that the source of this fire was a space heater that was not being used properly in one of the bedrooms of a third-floor apartment, and unfortunately, the fire was allowed to escalate and travel to the higher floors.
The fire making international news, with Archbishop of New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan sharing a message from Pope Francis, sending heartfelt condolences early Monday to the victims and their families in response to the blaze that began sometime before 11 a.m., sending smoke and flames to multiple floors throughout the 19-story complex as over 200 firefighters responded.
32 residents that are still hospitalized with serious injuries. We have a number of residents unaccounted for and unidentified. So we're just praying. We are sending condolences to those that have lost their loved ones, those that have lost children. No one imagined they will wake up a Sunday morning and would be faced with running for their lives because of a fire in their building.
Critical to the rescue were these ladders used to pull many out.
This is a building with no exterior fire escapes, and residents had to exit their apartments and travel using the stairwell, as well as FDNY ladders that were helping.
Displaced families were housed in 4 different hotels in the Bronx Sunday night into Monday morning, thanks to the work of the American Red Cross and the New York City Office of Emergency Management. In addition to this, an evacuation site for families is now operational and is also collecting donations at Monroe College's Houston Hall, located at 2375 Jerome Avenue. The American Red Cross is asking those looking for family members to call 311.
We're praying for those that are in the hospital that they survive. We're praying for healing and strength. And we're going to help with burial funeral services for those that need to be relocated outside of Twin Parks. We're going to help accommodate that as well.
For BronxNet, this is Alleyne Makoko.
Welcome back. The U.S. is taking a new year, new me approach as we begin 2022. A host of new laws went into effect at the start of this month, and legal analyst Dr. Tracy A. Pearson joins me to discuss legislation that may change your quality of life. Dr. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So before we jump in, can you briefly tell our viewers a little bit about your background as a legal analyst and your platform?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that opportunity. I have been an attorney for almost 2 decades, and I became a legal analyst and an organizational cultural analyst as well after I earned a second doctorate in education. I have a show on ENSL TV called Deep Dive with Dr. Tracy, and it's also a podcast. And the work that I do, I appear on a number of shows. I appear on radio. Probably have been heard by your viewers on WRHU in Hempstead. So the work that I do is I try to help people understand complicated issues, complicated legal matters, and matters involving the workplace.
So that is great because we definitely need your help understanding some of these new laws that came into place. So I'm so happy that you're here right now. One law that has changed for several states has been debated for years, and that's the cost of minimum wage. Amongst the several states to change their cost of minimum wage, Arizona sees the lowest rate at just $9.20, to California seeing the highest rate at $15. Why are we seeing these minimum wage increases now?
You're seeing these increases now because of ballot measures and legislation that phased in minimum wage increases over time. Many of these states have phased in incremental increases so that it wouldn't impact their bottom line as severely when it came to businesses.
Now, are these increases actually helpful amid rapid inflation?
Yes and no. Look, everyone needs to make more money. More money is better than less money. Inflation is the progressive increase of prices of goods and services. And what it means is that your dollar goes less. It's less effective. What cost you $5 in the past may cost you $8 moving forward. And so everyone needs to make more money. The question is, can the increase in minimum wage keep pace with the rate of inflation? And that remains to be seen.
Now, this isn't across the board. Federally, minimum wage will remain at $7.25, a rate that hasn't moved since it began in 2009. That's shockingly low despite what we're seeing with COVID. Because this is the law, is there anything that people can do to combat this?
Well, the best thing that you can do is contact your representative or your senator and advocate for them to introduce legislation to change the minimum wage. Most states have a better infrastructure legally than the federal government does. Where the state has better protections, the federal government's minimum protections don't apply.
Now, I really want to know, as I mentioned earlier, that Arizona saw the lowest rate of like $9 and California seeing 15. For those who don't know, can you explain why those numbers vary so much and why one state sees something much lower compared to another?
Sure. It is due to the way that these laws are enacted. Arizona is unique in that they have a different infrastructure when it comes to minimum wage, and it responds to outside factors. Whereas California has a legislative rubric, legislative process that introduced the increase in minimum wage over time and those incremental increases, as I mentioned.
Now, it's important to view these laws because I believe that many companies hope that the average person doesn't know them. If you find out that your employer is paying you less than minimum wage, what should you do?
Well, I hope that isn't true, that employers are trying to scam employees. But if you happen to notice that you are being paid less, the first thing to do is to approach your employer in a calm, rational manner and to ask a question. It never hurts to ask a question and to hear what they have to say. Some industries, for example, the wait staff in the restaurant industry, are paid less per hour but are paid tips. And as long as, in most states, as long as those tips and the hourly wage, which is less than minimum wage, balances out to minimum wage, then the employer is paying you the correct amount of money. But the best approach is to approach your employer and to ask a question. If your employer is non-responsive or unwilling to budge to comply with the law, then the next best step is to either contact a local attorney who's licensed in your jurisdiction, who's an employment lawyer, to ask a question. Most of the time, those consults are free. Or to also file a complaint with your Department of Labor in your state.
Now, I'm really happy that you mentioned that because I never thought of that with the wait staff. So that was really interesting. But what about stipends that amount to less than minimum wage? Because I know there's some people who work for stipends. Can you raise concerns about that legally?
When I was in graduate school, I worked for a stipend, so I completely understand that method of income. Unfortunately, minimum wage doesn't apply to stipends. So the best approach there and is for graduate students, as an example of that, to unionize and to negotiate with the employer for higher wages.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that one. So, with everything that happened within the last 2 years, it's no surprise that there's another law banning hidden medical bills called the quote, No Surprise Act. That was put into effect earlier this month. And this is a federal ban that protects patients when they receive emergency care or scheduled treatment from doctors and hospitals. However, I'm sure some people may have unique situations where this actually doesn't apply. How should someone go about finding out if they're covered by the law?
Sure. Well, first of all, I can tell you right now that if you are having, if you have private health insurance or health insurance through your employer, you're covered. Medicare and TRICARE folks were always covered by this policy. We'll call it a policy in terms of Medicare and TRICARE. And if you have vision, voluntary dental, or with something called a health reimbursement account, which is a unique vehicle where you're reimbursed by your employer for your medical expenses. In those cases, it doesn't apply. But the best thing to do is to Google. You can actually Google No Surprise Act and it comes up right away. It's one of the first things that you see there, and you can read a little bit more about it. The interesting piece about it is that it really does protect folks from getting these huge bills. When you go to a hospital on an emergency basis, you don't get to choose who your providers are, and they very well may be out of network. And that means higher prices for you. And so what providers were doing was that they were doing something called balance billing, which is that they were charging the patient the difference between what the insurance company paid for the out-of-network cost and the amount that the provider was charging, which can be astronomical in some cases.
Well, CNN reports even with the new law, consumers may still get big bills that they weren't expecting, especially in the earlier months of the year. How will that work? And if you find out that you've been hit with surprise bills, what can you do about it?
Well, the first thing that I would recommend folks do is that they contact the provider. If it's a hospital, contact the hospital billing department. It may have slipped through the cracks. It may have been something that wasn't caught when it went out because the bills were prepared, prior to a certain date when software changes over. We all have those experiences. So give them the benefit of the doubt. If that's not the case, or if they insist that the cost that they've billed you is correct, your next step is to contact your Health and Human Services department, most likely, and to let them know about the situation. If most Health and Human Services departments in states where they already have this type of law will help you out because they'll do it under their own law. If not, then they'll refer you to the federal Health and Human Services Department.
Now, across the country, more laws are expected to go into effect, and some of these will drastically change the outcome of situations for many people. How do you encourage people to stay up to date with these changes? And can you just speak on the importance of knowing your state law specifically?
It is really critical for folks to understand what the laws are in their state. Ignorance is not a defense is a phrase that people may have heard. And the easiest way to learn about new state laws is to pay attention to your media, to pay attention to this show, to pay attention to your newspapers, who they do articles on a regular basis about these types of improvements in legislation. In some cases, not improvements, but most of the time they are improvements to people's experiences in living and in their economic situation. And also, you can pay attention to the internet and review it by Googling. There is a lot of information out there, so be really careful. It's really important to be media literate and to understand the sources that you're referring to.
Dr. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me. I just want to say again that you do have a platform, and can you just let everybody know how they can stay up to date with you?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. You can follow me on Instagram and at Twitter at Tracy Explains. You can check out my website, which is tracyexplains.com, and you can catch my show on Thursdays, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. It is on ENSL TV. We also stream live on Facebook, on Twitter, on Smoke and Bacon, and now on LinkedIn. And you can watch it on replay on Roku and catch it as a podcast anywhere you find your favorite podcasts.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx to the world.
BronxNet.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Trans.
Very painful. We was crying a lot.
Yeah, we was crying a lot, but God help us. Thank God, you know. So our friends, 3 kids passed away. Our friend daughter passed away also. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, you know.
I was in shock. I literally just saw them in there. I was in shock. I was so happy. I'm like speechless right now.
What did you do? Did you hug them?
Oh yes, I grabbed them. They're sitting down having some food right now. I grabbed them. Like my eyes couldn't believe it.
How many people
It's
are in
crowded.
there?
There's like at least hundreds of people in there. That's this place. It's very crowded. There's a lot of emotions going on. Right. That's a big one, 19 floors, and around like 10, 12 apartments per floor. So a lot of people are probably not gonna have nowhere to stay tonight.
Looking at those who are sitting there, majority of them are West Africans from Gambia. So which means that if that is the reflection of those who perish, I would say, you know, the majority of them, I would not be surprised to know that they're from Gambia, West Africa.
We were just inside with most of the families that just experienced this whole tragedy. Oh my God. So I spoke to 2 family members that was telling me that how they survived and how they just stayed in their house and put down towels, wet towels. And one of the young ladies, she took out her air conditioner out of the room in order for air to flow through. So we did a prayer visual together. We prayed for the families, for all church leaders. We all came together and we prayed together with the families and encouraged them.
Welcome back. New York State homeowners may now receive a lifeline as the state struggles to cope with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me for discussion about a relief program called the Homeowners Assistance Fund is Senior Vice President of Homeownership and Community Development, Dina Levy. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, being a New Yorker, I often hear a lot about the fight to adjust rent. But being in the city, we don't often hear about the struggles of homeowners, even though we do have quite a few here. What are some challenges homeowners are dealing with in New York City during the wake of this pandemic?
It's a great question. So we do have a very high rate of homeownership in New York City, which most, I think, folks don't know intuitively. But one of the big populations that we're concerned with and that this program will address are those that live in limited equity or even market rate condos or co-ops. And we do have the lion's share of the co-ops in New York State are concentrated in New York City with a very a large percentage of that being in the Bronx. So we are very focused on making sure that cooperators who may have fallen behind on a mortgage, but maybe also just fall behind on their monthly carrying charges or HOA fees, that they know that this resource is available to them. We do think that population is definitely in need, and we are encouraging them strongly to apply.
Okay, that's really interesting because I didn't know there were so many like homeowners like in our city, let alone the Bronx. So that's really interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So as I mentioned, there is now a homeowners assistance fund. Can you tell me more about that program and how it actually began?
Sure. So this is a federally funded program that came from Congress. It was passed as part of the American Rescue Act back in March of 2021. The federal government then allocated to each state based on population and their expectation of distress in home ownership. New York State was awarded through that process $539 million to run the program. There was a process to go through in which we had to get approvals from the U.S. Department of Treasury for our proposed plan. We were given that approval by Treasury back in November. We were actually the first state in the nation to get that approval. And then we had spent a good month leading up to the opening of the application portal, really getting the word out, making sure homeowners know that the relief is out there, understand a little bit about what the program entails, what the application process will look like. And then we opened our doors for applications on January 3rd. So just a little over a week ago.
Wow. So the fund, to my understanding, will provide up to $50,000 in aid to these homeowners. What are some examples of things that this will cover?
So as I said, there's a diverse portfolio of home ownership in New York State. So we have homeowners who just own a regular 1 to 4 unit stick-built home. They may have fallen behind on their mortgage, but there's also an ability for us to assist people who've fallen behind on things like property taxes or water or sewage bills. There is this large population of limited equity and also market rate co-op and condo owners. Again, they may have a mortgage or they may have fallen behind on their monthly carrying charges. And then the last bit, which isn't so relevant to New York City, but is important across the state, the program can assist manufactured homeowners who may have a monthly lot rent or carrying charge, which they pay to a park owner to site their home in a manufactured home park. So that largely encompasses the different types of homeowners. Generally speaking, anybody who is a homeowner and feels that they're at risk of default or foreclosure should 100% reach out to our call center, go to our website. There is a ton of information about who is eligible and how to apply.
Now, can you just briefly talk about how this will significantly change the lives of so many people following this pandemic?
Yeah. So obviously, having a decent, safe, and secure place to live is extremely important all the time, but particularly important in these times that we're living in, where the ability to come home to a safe place to shelter. The whole intent of the New York State HAF program is to make sure that we are helping homeowners get to a sustainable outcome. So it's not a Band-Aid. It's really intended to address arrearages or any missed payments that accrued during the pandemic or the worst part of the pandemic, and getting to the other side of that so that the homeowners have an affordable monthly payment that they are feeling that they can cover going forward. So that is really the key, is a sustainable relief program so that folks are not struggling once they've been assisted by HAF.
Nice. I really like that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of these programs are kind of like Band-Aids, right? So like, oh, we're good, we'll pause something for a little bit, but then you have to go back to it. So I really like that you mentioned that. Can you elaborate on the importance of homeowners taking advantage of this opportunity immediately?
It does take, obviously, some time to go through a foreclosure process, but we don't want folks to wait. We want them to apply now, before there's a crisis, before they're in court. If you are already in court, you are still 100% eligible to apply, and we strongly urge those folks to do so as well. But we want folks to get into the program before they're facing like an urgent emergency. That's one good reason to apply quickly. Another is, right, that even though $530 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, we don't fully know what the total need is across New York State. So it is possible we could end up getting more applications over time than even, that big sum of money can support. So We want folks to apply early and make sure that they're not waiting and then either finding out that they're in crisis or that the program has expended all of its funds.
Now, this is an incredible opportunity, as you mentioned, for families who need this. Can you detail the perfect candidate for this type of relief? Because I understand there are some ways that you're eligible to apply.
There are some eligibility requirements. I think the most important to be mindful of is that there are income limits. So homeowners who earn basically what is known as the area median income, but that equates basically to what is the average income for your county. So if you're in the Bronx, it's based on Bronx County. All of New York City has the same standard. There is a chart available on our website that shows you exactly what that income eligibility threshold is by your household size. So if it's 2 people living, it's one number. If it's 3 people living in the household, it's a different number. There's a chart on our website that folks can reference to make sure that they are income eligible before they start the application process. You have to be a New York State resident who occupies your home as its primary residence, which means it is the place you live most of the year. And you do have to attest to the fact as part of this program that your housing challenge or whatever it is that you've fallen behind on is a result of an impact of COVID. So that means you either lost income or you had increases in expenses as a result of COVID. Those are the baseline eligibility criteria. There are some other details, but we want folks to apply. And then as they get into the system, we have a fairly large team of case managers and technical assistance providers who will then help coach folks through the process until we get to the conclusion.
Now, I know that you're expecting to receive way more applications and resources than resources are available. Can you tell us what that application process actually looks like?
Sure. We did go to great lengths, and so far I think it's been pretty successful to really try to simplify the application process. There are 3 ways generally to apply. The first is through this online application portal that we've built specifically for the program. I will say again, we've tried very hard to simplify that application process. I think for most people, it's taking no more than 15 to 20 minutes, depending on whether they're ready when they start the application. You can save your work in that application. So if you have to pause for any reason, you can go away, find a document, answer a phone call, whatever you have to do, and then come back and pick up where you left off. The other way to apply for folks who are just not comfortable applying online, and there could be any number of reasons why that's true, we have a call center that's staffed by live operators. It's open Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. By calling the call center, you can either ask general questions about the program, or if you prefer, you can actually apply by talking to one of our operators who will then put your information into the system for you. I do want to say that both the application portal, the online piece, and the call center piece are in multi-languages. So we are, I think right now, up to 10 converted languages on the website. We have 10 languages spoken in the call center. And if we do encounter a language that isn't fluent or ready, there is a live translation service that we can bring into the conversation. And then lastly, we do have a network of partners that are operating across the state. These are not-for-profit organizations, housing, counseling, and legal service providers that can submit an application on your behalf. If you go to our website and click on Get Local Support, you can put in your zip code and find the organization who's part of our program that's serving your zip code. And exactly how to get in touch with them. So again, we've tried to simplify and make easy for no matter your language, no matter your technology, skill level, there is a way for you to apply for this program.
Now, in addition to financial support, your program also provides resources that you mentioned right now, like the call centers, legal service, housing counselors, and so much more. Can you briefly tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So thank you for raising it. One of the ways we hope to serve as many New Yorkers as possible is through making sure that particularly those applicants who have a mortgage are getting whatever relief is available to them through their bank. So folks may know, right, that if they're getting letters from their bank, there may be something called like a mortgage modification that's available. Again, I think generally speaking, this time around, the banks have been directed to simplify that process for homeowners. It still can be complicated. So when we have an applicant who has a mortgage, one of the things the program will do for them is work with them and their lender directly to make sure that whatever the lender can contribute to getting the homeowner current and back on their feet, that the banks are offering that properly and expeditiously to the homeowners, so that you may need half on top of that, but enabling homeowners to get the relief they're entitled to from banks will stretch how many homeowners we can serve all in with our half dollars. So it's a really important point. And again, the network of housing counselors and legal services that are partners to this program also are doing that level of advocacy with the banks to make sure folks are getting all the relief they're entitled to.
All right, Dina, thank you so much for joining me. Can you just quickly reference where people can go to sign up?
100%. So start by going to our website. That is nyhomeownerfund.org. You can call our call center, which is 844-776-9423. And thank you so much for getting the word out about this important program.
No problem. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us here on Open BxRx Tuesday. This week, the Whole Health Report, sponsored by Empire Bluecross Blueshield, is back. Today, we are welcoming back Laura Brosen, a registered nurse and clinical quality program director for Empire. And our special guest today is Raven Carter, assistant vice president of operations for Montefiore Medical Center. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So today we're here to talk about the unique partnership that Empire and Montefiore have in serving the Bronx community. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about that partnership and how it benefits the Bronx?
Sure. So at Empire, our mission is to materially and measurably improve the health of all New Yorkers. So for us, that means not just our members, but for members of the community. And working with Montefiore in the Bronx, we're committed to a 3-year partnership to work with them in the Bronx to deliver programs for health screenings and public events to address things that we consider important community conditions such as asthma, blood pressure screening, cancer screening, and diabetes. And for example, in October, we had an event with Montefiore that was really successful in St. James Park. We had more than 1,000 people in the community come out, and we called it the Fit Fest. We had people exercising. We had people had interactions with health professionals, got advice on diabetes. There was Zumba, and really engaging in health behaviors to change their perspective on health and to bring, just health and vibrance to the community in the Bronx.
Now, I understand you also held a Thanksgiving event here in the Bronx. Can you tell us more about that?
So I can take a little bit of that. So yes, food insecurity is one of the biggest issues plaguing New York City overall and here in the Bronx. So during Thanksgiving, we wanted to provide some food for the Thanksgiving meal that we all love to eat every year. But we also wanted to provide some healthy alternatives to recipes that are traditionally high in fat, high in calories, and sodium. So we offered free produce along with a couple recipes that were appropriate for the various cultures that are represented in the Bronx. We had a sweet potato recipe that used pineapples as a sweetness rather than high sugar alternatives. We also shared a healthier version of the apple pecan crumble that is also a favorite on a lot of our Thanksgiving menus. All told, we provided 2,500 bags of produce, which is enough food that would feed a minimum of a family of 5. So it was a really successful event for our community.
I also really like that you kind of kept it true to the community and having the foods that they like to eat, because I think it's easier for people to make that change if it's familiar. So I think that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I understand that you also recently held an event to recognize healthcare workers at Montefiore. Can you elaborate on that and explain why you chose to do it for night shift workers?
Sure. We have a lot of events and celebrations and recognitions rather for our staff. But oftentimes they're focused on day shift because let's face it, that's when most of us are awake. That's when businesses are open. That's when our partner organizations probably have more resources. But we're responsible for taking care of patients 24/7. Emergencies don't shut off just because the sun goes down. And we really thought that it was really important and for us to value the work that happens at night while most of us are sleeping. And these are also the staff that sometimes go unnoticed. And we wanted to call attention to the amazing job that they do each and every day to care for our patients. So that's why Empire sponsored an event where night shift workers could take some time out of their busy schedules, enjoy a nice meal, and just have a little time of rest and relaxation from their normal day. All told, we served about 600 Montefiore healthcare workers across all of our Bronx hospitals, and it was a great turnout and a great respite for our staff.
Yes, I'd like to say as a nurse, I was so excited that Empire celebrated these night shift workers. I worked plenty of night shifts myself, and so glad to celebrate the COVID workers and all of the Montefiore staff that work so hard. So I thought this was a great event, and I think that the Montefiore staff seemed, really excited by it.
For sure.
No, I like that you mentioned that they were excited, because I really wanted to know, what was the response from the community and, what was the reaction from night shift workers? Because you mentioned that oftentimes they can be a little ignored, or we just think about the people during the day. So yeah, what was the reaction from night shift workers?
Well, I think in healthcare, the old saying also holds true. The way to someone's heart is through their stomach. So they certainly enjoyed having a bite to eat. And really, I think they just were, they felt special that someone specifically wanted to hold an event just for them. And I think we had a line ready to go probably before the food was even right on the table. So it was very well appreciated by our night shift staff.
Now, what does your partnership have planned for the future, and where can we get more information about these events?
Well, the partnership that we have with Empire Bluecross is one that's dear to our hearts, and we plan on having additional community events and health fairs throughout 2022 in the Bronx. This is our way of showing our commitment to our community and to improving the health outcomes that have really, that we're focused on at Montefiore. And so we want to do more of that work coming in this next coming year. It's only January, the first week or so of January, so we're still in the planning phase, but we certainly plan to bring back some of the events that we held in 2021. We want to do things that focus on healthy living and education, and definitely something around the back to school time to really work with parents and kids in our community.
Now, I also I'm so sorry. You can go.
No, I'm sorry. Raven, that I couldn't agree more. Empire is really committed to this partnership. In addition, we're really focused on health equity, food insecurity, and the things that are really important to the members of the Bronx. We're so appreciative to partner with Montefiore because we know that you have the finger on the pulse there in the Bronx. So working together, we think it's a really great meld of the health plan and Montefiore Medical Center working together to bring that to the community.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more? I know you have so many events. You also had a holiday event. I would really like to learn a little bit more about that. Can you just tell me what went on and why you had that event?
Sure. So that's probably our most recent event, if you will. And, it was a fun time. Everyone enjoys the holidays. We were able to give out books. We got, the kids got to play with Santa and Elf, and really just a time for education and a little bit of fun and holiday cheer in the communities that we serve. We ended up providing actual produce to about 4,000 families in the Bronx. So it was also like a really great community outreach for us.
All right. So can you just tell people where they can learn more information and stay up to date with your organizations?
Sure. So a lot of these events that we do are local in the community. So the best way to learn about where you can find the events is to follow us on social media. And then you can see where the events are happening locally. So please follow us on those social media tags to find out when the events are happening. And we look forward to meeting you in the community.
All right. I want to say thanks to Raven and Laura. I'm so glad that you're both here to promote a healthier Bronx. Laura, we look forward to having you back soon with the whole health report from Empire Bluecross Blueshield.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So that's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.